Yes, hello, and welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. And welcome to Friday's show. Big, huge, breaking, exclusive news. It looks like DC Studios has found its leader and its president. Movie producer Dan Lin. So this is huge news. He's not officially the head of DC Studios yet, but every publication is saying that he's in negotiations. We have a huge write-up from the Hollywood Reporter. We are going to get the details. So who is Dan Lin? Dan Lin has a huge CV with many movies he's produced. Huge movies, independent movies. He's a fanboy, and he was going to produce George Miller's Justice League Immortal, and I'll read you the quote from him when he was originally going to produce that film a little bit later on, just to show you what a fanboy he is. So this is very exciting news, so let's get the details. DC's Kevin Feige found ? Right, I'm fed up of this comparison of Kevin Feige. We all thought Kevin Feige was something he isn't, clearly. We have seen the MCU become a mediocre extremist franchise. We've heard VFX artists complain about cruel slavery treatment. So let's not compare the potential new head of DC Studios to Kevin Feige. Producer Dan Lin in talks to take control of film, TV for superhero arm by Boris Kitt of The Hollywood Reporter. The move, which would see DC Films president Walter Hamada exit, which is everything we want, comes as new Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav seeks a reset for the brand. A reset. That's come out of Zaslav's mouth publicly himself. You can be in denial about that, but these are facts. Anyway, has the new head of DC, has he been found? Dan Lin, the executive turned producer who counts hits such as the live-action Aladdin, the Lego Movie, and It horror movies among his credits, is in talks to take the role of DC chief. Multiple sources tell The Hollywood Reporter. The role would encompass overseeing not just film, but television as well, with Lin reporting directly to Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav, according to sources. The proposed structure would bypass three separate division heads: Warner Brothers Pictures heads Michael DeLuca and Pam Adby, HBO and HBO Max chief Casey Bloys, and Warner Brothers TV chair Channing Dungey, and put control in DC hands of one person. So, let's talk about that section. Why is this a good idea? Basically, by just reporting to Zaslav, things can be greenlit a lot quicker. It means there's no interference. Now, let me compare this to the structure they had under Walter Hamada. Under Hamada would have to report to Casey Bloys, the TV chief. Would he at least have to confer with them? And basically, he was led by Toby Emmerich, the former chief chair of Warner Brothers Pictures Group. So that was problematic, wasn't it? He was being controlled. So when Ray Fisher came to him making complaints about Geoff Johns and cruel treatment from Whedon during the Justice League reshoots, his strings were being pulled by Ann Sarnoff. Now, that's an interesting thing, because Zaslav got rid of her position straight away because it was just another bureaucrat to report to. But Dan Lin will be directly reporting to David Zaslav. If Zaslav is fine with it, whatever he wants to do, then Dan can do his thing. This is a much better structural appointment and very exciting for any DC fan. And it just brings a better structure, a clearer structure, and it means he'll be less of a puppet. And what's interesting about what Zaslav is doing as well, he's taking the focus away from streaming. And what he's doing is he's going to focus on broadcast television a lot more. Something we thought that was dying because we were all saying streaming is the future. Streaming is not the future. We're going back. We're doing a backbeat. David Zaslav is going to focus on the theatrical model and the broadcast television model. He's going to merge Discovery Plus and HBO Max. It will be a fine streaming service. But for example, he doesn't believe, like Disney do, and other streaming entities believe, that everything the studio and the company makes needs to be on their own streaming service. For example, the Batman animated series, which is being made by J.J. Abrams, Bruce Timm, and Matt Reeves, he's decided to sell it off to another streamer or another broadcaster because there's more money in that. What Disney do is, it's all ours, everything's ours, but there's not as much money in that. So this guy Zaslav is a very, sly player, a coy player. Every decision he's made, I defend, because I think business and for the future, business-wise, and for the future of DC and WB, the decisions he's making will be very, very good for fans and the company itself in the future. Walter Hamada, the current head of DC Films, would transition out of the role, according to sources, which is great news. A Warner's insider say that no negotiations are taking place and no official offer has been made, although other sources say the parties are discussing a salary. Reporting structure and the future of Lynn's prolific production company, Rideback. If any deal does close, it would cap off one of the most intense executive searches in recent memory, one that faced scrutiny by rival Hollywood producers and executives as well as DC fans. Zaslav has said he was searching for Warner's own version, here we go again, of Kevin Feige, the famed Marvel executive who has steered the rival comic book company's movie slate, and then later its TV portfolio, transforming it into a multi-billion-dollar pop culture juggernaut that's coming to its end. That is a nigh impossible ask, but it didn't stop executives' names from surfacing. Emma Watts proved to be an early contender, while in recent months, names such as Amy Pascal, heaven forbid, Matt Tolmach, Sean Bailey, and Craig Berlanti were rumored to be taking meetings or pushed by canny agency heads. Lynn's name appeared late in the game, but he has a champion in Warner's advisor, Alan Holm. So this is very, very good. If Alan Holm is putting your name forward, that means you must be good. And, I can imagine Alan Holm when, some other, like Greg Berlanti's, names like that being put forward, he'd probably fucking laughed. The former Disney chair who ran Warner's as president and COO in Alt, it was during that latter tenure that Lynn worked for Holm, starting as a junior exec and rising to senior VP production. He struck on his own as a producer in 2008, but not before shepherding movies such as The Departed and 10,000 BC. He also oversaw the infamous and aborted Justice League feature that was to have been directed by George Miller. And I'll read you the quote that Lynn was talking about that film after I read this article. The 2007-8 Writers Guild of America's strike and tax credit complications were factors in its derailing, as was the sequel to Superman Returns, if you remember. Lynn is a respected producer known for his smarts, and in a town full of hype and egos, his willingness to find experts on films that are not in his forte. He has worked on franchises, the Robert Downey Jr. starring Sherlock Holmes features, the 4 Lego movies, as well as the widely successful 2-part adaptation of Stephen King's It. His resume ranges from big offerings such as the billion-dollar grossing Aladdin to intimate dramas such as the Oscar-nominated The Two Popes. He is coming off of an early August release of Universal's Joe Coy comedy Easter Sunday. And he also has TV experience, A key factor for the new position, Lin and his company executive produced the Lethal Weapon show that aired for 3 seasons on Fox, and Walker the reboot of Walker Texas Ranger that will begin its 3rd season on the CW this fall. He and his company are in post-production on the big budget live-action series take on Avatar: The Last Airbender for Netflix. Lin has also shown ambitions beyond the screen. His banner Rideback has a non-profit arm and several initiatives and fellowships that aid basically diversity and inclusion and rising entrepreneurs. It is unclear what would happen to Rideback, but one scenario, according to sources, is that Warner Brothers Discovery would take some sort of stake in the company. Rideback would also continue to operate as a production entity and be run by current president Jonathan Elrich. If Lin takes over, he will replace Hamada, who joined DC in 2018, a time when the brand was looking to reset after Justice League 2017 bombed. But there was no reset. I know he planned to kind of relaunch the DCEU via the Flash movie, but we had to wait a long time, right? We were going to see it this year originally, and it was going to reset the DCEU. But think about that reset. It was problematic. Hamada, who had a reputation as an amiable collaborator, kept a much lower profile than Marvel's Feige, who is very much the face of the franchise. And let's be clear, we need this new DC president, whether it's Lin or somebody else, to be the face of the franchise. Though rival Marvel Studios has a closely connected universe, DC under Hamada explored some stories that took place in separate universes, including the $1 billion grossing Oscar-winning Joker 2019 and Matt Reeves' The Batman 2022, which brought in $769.2 million globally. Sequels to both are in the works. Hamada built relationships with talent such as Marvel favourite James Gunn, who directed The Suicide Squad 2021 and created the HBO Max spin-off Peacemaker, and has other projects in development at DC. However, Hamada's tenure also underscored the public pressures that come with leading DC. For the past 2 years, Hamada has found himself the subject of critical tweets from Justice League actor Ray Fisher, which put the executive in the unusual position of running a film division while being publicly criticised by one of its stars, and being in hiding and being the very opposite of the face of DC, which really hurt the brand. Because every time something was said about DC, there was no one to come out and deny it or clarify it. In the summer of 2020, Fisher accused filmmaker Joss Whedon of abusive and unprofessional behaviour on the set of 2017 reshoot for Justice League, which Whedon oversaw after director Zack Snyder departed. Though Hamada was not at DC during the production of Justice League, Fisher accused the executive of attempting to throw Whedon, as well as producer John Berg, under the bus in order to protect Geoff Johns, another Justice League producer. Fisher said enabled Whedon. Hamada was cleared in the studio's investigations of any Justice League interference. Of course it was going to clear him, of course. Hamada was gearing up to release 3 or 4 films a year between theatres and HBO Max when the Warner Brothers Discovery merger occurred. Some see his exit as coming only part way through his DC course correct, while other observers believe he did not get enough internal support from the previous AT&T regime. Well, that's because AT&T didn't employ him. This is the problem. Let me explain to you. This was the problem. You had AT&T, who owned Warner Media, Warner Brothers, right? But you had Warner Brothers Pictures, that was being run by Ann Sarnoff and Toby Emmerich. And they were controlling Hamada and what was going on with DC. And there was a toxic arm. AT&T were very supportive of the Snyderverse, and Warner Brothers Pictures was not. There was a civil war. If Lin comes in and he's one person and he's totally in control and he only reports to Zaslav, this is a much better situation. The other situation I've just explained was a fucking mess. And that's why we are where we are today. Lin would join DC at a time in which Zaslav has vowed to reshape DC with a 10-year plan. he hopes will allow the brand to compete with Disney-owned Marvel Studios, which has built the biggest film franchise in history, but not the best. We've done a reset. We think we can build a much stronger, sustainable growth business out of DC, said Zaslav in an earnings call August 4th, just 2 days after he scrapped the $90 million HBO Max Batgirl film that Hamada presided over. As part of that, we are going to focus on quality. We are not going to release any film before it's ready. DC is something we can make better. Everything that Zaslav said in the investors call on August the 4th was facts and right. He's done nothing wrong. The $3 billion he's cutting because of the merger and because of the terrible way this studio has been run, he's making the right decisions. By making these cuts, by dumping Batgirl, he can forge an exciting future for WB and for us especially, DC. And that is the article, and we're going to get into it now. Right, let's read a very old quote from Dan Lin, the prospective new head of DC Studios, about Justice League Mortal. Lin described his movie, Justice League Mortal, as his dream project and said DC Entertainment seems to be switching gears and taking a page from Marvel Studios' playbook. I'll say it's the reason I started my company, you know. I thought that was the ultimate project. I was a fanboy. That's very exciting. For me to work with all those characters together on a team and kind of the themes of that movie, that's my dream. It's on hold right now as DC sorts out its strategy, but it seems like they're building to Justice League instead of going with the team movie first and doing individual movies after that. So very, very interesting. So he's a fanboy. He was very excited to be making, you know, a brilliant Justice League movie with one of the best directors out there. When you've got George Miller making a Justice League movie, you don't abort that movie for one reason or the other. Who knows? It could still be a thing. So the potential appointment of Lin, this guy Lin, could be very, very exciting for the future of DC live action. Now let's discuss if Dan Lin would be a great head of DC Studios. First of all, let's compare him to Walter Hamada. So there's a similarity here, that Dan has worked with Warner Brothers a lot. Walter Hamada was heading New Line Cinema and its horror division, an entity owned by Warner Brothers. So they're really where the similarities end. So if I just stop there, there would be some red flags. You'd say to yourself, like I was this morning when I didn't know much about Dan, I would say, hang on a minute, this is kind of a like-for-like swap, and you could see some red flags there. But then you realise that Dan isn't a number cruncher like Hamada. Hamada was brought in to keep the DC universe cheap. We saw a lot of cheaply made films in the DCEU under his tutorship. For example, the first Shazam movie was made very cheaply, under 100 million. That's why it made a slight profit, because it made about just over 300 million, nearly 400 million. But if it cost more money, that film would have been a flop. But you could tell it was a cheap movie. It was a good movie, it looked good in places, but some of the VFX simply wasn't good enough, and even David F. Sandberg kind of concedes that. Not David's fault. You can only, with VFX, if you don't have the money, it's difficult to make it look good. And so Hamada was a bureaucrat, a number cruncher. So Dan Lin is a movie man. You know, he said it himself. He's a fanboy. He was very excited to be working on Justice League Mortal with all these Justice League characters. So it's very, very interesting. We got Mike DeLuca, one of the co-chairs of Warner Brothers Pictures, who's a movie guy, who's a guy who loves movies. We now have potentially Dan Lin as the president of DC Studios, a geek, a nerd, a movie guy. This is very, very exciting. So there are huge differences to Dan Lin and Walter Hamada. And I trust David Zaslav because he's making Ruthless huge decisions. But as I said earlier, these are decisions focusing on the theatrical system. Believe you me, everyone, these are the right decisions. Because, let me explain something to you. For example, in terms of the streaming, so, selling Sandman, Neil Gaiman's Sandman to Netflix wasn't a Zaslav decision, I don't think. But let me tell you why it was a good idea. First of all, for you, the customer, wherever you live in the world, you've got Netflix, mostly. You can watch Sandman now. If it went to HBO Max, they wouldn't have made as much money because selling it to Netflix means they make more money. And as a customer service on HBO Max, not everyone around the world can see their content. So it's not a bad thing to say, let's sell some of our stuff to other broadcasters and streamers. Nobody should be losing their shit. Again, very intelligent decision making. But back to Dan Lin. I believe this is the right person. There could have been other people. I'm not saying he's the only one for the job. But what I'm saying is, in DeLuca and Abby and now Dan Lin, we've got people who bleed entertainment. They're not extremists. These are people who want to give you great content. These are movie fans as well as experienced producers. I'm not saying they've just come out the cinema with popcorn stuck all over their chins and stuff. I'm telling you that they care about the entertainment value. So that's what we want. These are the type of things we want. And this decision making will hold DC and WB in good stead in the future. So if you're asking me, because I'm sure most of you, like me this morning, had never heard of Dan Lin, then I clicked Justice League Mortal and everything else he's done. This is a guy, hopefully, that will be the public face of DC Studios, that comes out and talks to the fans like Feig does. Feig doesn't talk to the fans as much as he used to, by the way. There's no surprise there. Something DC Studios can take advantage of. Dan Lin seems to be a very bright and bubbly and passionate character. I want to see him speak publicly. I want him on the internet. I want him on Twitter. And I want him to forge a relationship with us, the fans. And he'd be very welcome on my channel for an interview. I can't pay you, Dan, but I'd love to talk to you. And it's not exactly the greatest tech or picture, but I'm a big DC fan. The people who watch this channel and subscribe to this channel are wonderful people. I've got a lot of time for all of them, even the ones who don't like me and just hate watch me. And we all love DC and we all love entertainment. And, it's just so exciting to finally know we're getting a competent, someone who bleeds entertainment, who's excited to be running DC. And I can't wait for him to get started. So yes, I believe this is a very, very good decision going forward. So I think it's the worst kept secret. We know now Hamada is going very shortly, probably October, probably before that. He's been sharpening pencils in his office for a long time, poor love. But the multiverse strategy that he was planning is dead. Worst kept secret in Hollywood. The fans know it. It is dead. Keaton's Batman is not the future. I love Keaton's Batman. I'd love to see Zaslav say to Tim Burton and Michael, come back for a third movie. That would be great. But Michael Keaton in the DCEU, I didn't think this at the time, but it's the dumbest, most confusing decision ever. And Zaslav, didn't like the new timeline. He's cancelled it. We now know that Batfleck is going to be in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. And because of that, I'm kind of okay with waiting for the Aquaman sequel till a year this Christmas. The Christmas of 2023, a great release date. I think it will stay there now. But Jason Momoa has been telling everyone who will listen how much he loves Ben Affleck and his Batman and Bruce Wayne. And he actually hinted that Batfleck could be in the Aquaman sequel quite a lot. Well, he kind of said he could be in it for a little bit, or he could be in it for a lot. So, this means maybe there could be even more reshoots with Ben Affleck involved. So that's exciting. What fans don't know is the future of the DCEU. I've kind of guesstimated and kind of predicted that they may just release these movies, then start again. But they may expand on the DCEU and continue it. I don't know what they're planning, but Dan Lin and David Zaslav will make the right decisions. We've got the right people on our team now, people, and this is very exciting. So we could have a lot of Batfleck in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and that makes me really excited. And finally today, as I tried to do yesterday by mocking another entity in SJW Entertainment, we finished today's show on a lighter note. Yes, Batgirl actor, I don't know their pronouns, so we'll try not saying he, him, or they, or whatever, so we don't offend anyone. That's not why I'm going to mock this person. We're going to read a thread they posted on Twitter. Quite hilarious. So Ivory Aquino played a role, I think, of Barbara Gordon's best friend in the Batgirl movie, and she wrote an opening begging letter to David Zaslav, begging him to allow the movie to be made and to be released. So let's give it a read and have a good laugh. And it's a long thread. I can't believe where do these people find the energy? I try and write a thread, and after 2 pages I'm like, oh fuck this, I can't be bothered now. A letter to David Zaslav at WBD. Dear Mr. Zaslav, I just read an article on the Hollywood Reporter about supposed funeral screenings of Batgirl and the possibility afterwards that the film footage would be destroyed. If this is the case, as one of many who poured our hearts into the making of this movie, I ask that this measure be reconsidered. As much as I've tried my best to be strong these past few weeks, I'd find myself crying, for lack of a better term, from grief, and tonight was one of those nights. As much as Batgirl has been labelled a woke film, it simply came together that way because of writing that reflects the world we live in. For me, more than anything, it's a father-daughter story which hits close to home, as my dad passed a year ago, which is nothing to laugh about because my dad died last December, so I'm sorry to hear that, Ivory. So where are we yet? Well, because of writing that reflects the world we live in, for me, more than anything, it is a father-daughter story which hits closer to home as my dad passed a year ago. Shortly before I booked this project, and I was hoping it would resonate with other children. Well, look, everyone loses parents. That's not a good reason to release a movie. Around the world, grown and not so grown, who hold their fathers in the highest esteem, and who could see Batgirl as a story of that special bond, I found myself not being able to talk about this ordeal with anyone. I realised that no one apart from those involved with the film would truly understand what we're feeling and talking about. Yeah, and you wouldn't understand what it's like to be starving and begging for food. But, you know, that's what I'm talking about. Your problems is not really a real problem. Your work somewhere else in the industry, you know, it's disappointing. I feel bad for them all. But, you know, this is how the cookie crumbles. And this is not Mr. Zaslav's fault, by the way. I forgot her name. Not her. I forgot your name already. Ivory, yeah. Not Mr. Zaslav's fault, Ivory. Not that you're attacking him. This is Toby Emmerich's fault for deciding, you know, and Jason Kilar for deciding to budget a movie for 70 million and, you know, squeezing it on HBO Max, a streaming service that's not even viewed all over the world. So, you know, Zaslav tried to fix the situation. He wanted to put it in movie theatres, but it wasn't of the quality and didn't feel it was worth his while financially to give it more money. Film would truly understand what we're feeling and talking about it with my castmates, I feel might be akin to rubbing salt on a still open wound. My heart goes out to Leslie Grace and our beloved directors and entire crew and cast who spent months dedicating their all to this endeavour. Leslie checked in on me the day we found out of the shelving and only had words of comfort and support. I've dared not ask since if she spent nights holding back tears like I have, because she has had to be the face of our Batgirl family and has had to put on a brave face as a way of taking care of us the way she gracefully steered our film. Tonight I finally got to talk with a dear friend, hear about these intense feelings, who shared with me an antidote, which helped provide inspiration for this letter to you. They said the head of a company. is like one large cog atop increasingly smaller cogs underneath. One seemingly small movement by this large cog may seem relatively tiny, but for those little cogs at the bottom, they can be spinning tenfold, and the effects can be seismic. I can only endeavour to understand how one feels when tasked with tending to the bottom line like you have. I can't even begin to imagine what one in your position goes through having such great responsibility to attend to. I do know and ask with something like Batgirl, that's a product of our hearts and souls, that the little cogs not simply be seen as widgets whose fates are determined by an equation to benefit the bottom line more than widgets. We are fellow human beings and artists who, when given the chance, can outperform the equation and multiply the bottom line exponentially. If a month ago there wasn't a marketing budget for Batgirl, I'd venture to say that has been taken care of by the turn of events these past few weeks. We've been fortunate to have such amazing supporters since the beginning. From Glasgow, where we filmed them, from all over the world. Now more people know about our labour of love and are eager to see the movie. I do hope you get to read this letter. Consider releasing Batgirl. She's always been an underdog and has nowhere to go but up. Well, basically, if you understand Batgirl, not necessarily an underdog, but they've tried to frame her as an underdog, right? And releasing certain quotes from the comics because she's a woman or a girl when everyone's underestimated her. As I said yesterday, and I've said multiple times, Batgirl is one of the hugest DC characters. All us DC fans adore her, love her. We've read her, we've seen her in animation. We would love to see her in a huge 200 million production, written and directed by someone like Christopher Nolan or Matt Reeves or someone who even understands the character. It would be great. But the point here is, Ivory, your film was given 70 million. It doesn't have the quality to be released. They don't want to release it on HBO Max, and they don't want to release it in cinemas because they feel, because of the information and the responses from test audiences, it's just not good enough to release cinematically. And here's the situation. I wouldn't be surprised if they burnt the movie already, but there's probably a copy of it somewhere. Listen, David Zaslav is making big decisions, and I don't see him respond. Maybe he'll respond to her personally. I don't think he's a bad guy like everyone makes him. But I think canning this movie, as bad as it is in terms of when you see what Ezra Miller's done and he's still got a job, and Leslie and Ivory and everyone like that who have been very professional and done their jobs have lost their jobs in a movie. They'll still get paid, by the way. They already probably have got paid. I don't know. They probably lose out to royalties, so that's probably one of the reasons this actor is begging for this film to be released. I don't think he's going to take any notice. I don't think he's going to change his mind. I do think one day we will get a really, really good Batgirl movie, but this one is just not going to be released. I don't know about the woke accusations. She talks about it representing the world we live in. Well, do you know what, Ivory? Entertainment can be about a realistic world, a gritty world, a real world, or a fantasy world. But when you're talking about Batgirl, people want to immerse themselves in the fantasy and the escapism. I don't mind that you're an LGBTQ plus actor. It's fine. It's cool. They've created a role for you. That's great. But there are more important things in this world than the fact that you and your fellow actors and crew and directors worked really hard on a movie. People work in restaurants, in fish and chip shops, in supermarkets. Sometimes they get made redundant. Who do they write an open letter to? No one, because no one gives a shit. So excuse me if I just laugh and mock you a little bit when you're probably quite a wealthy actor with lots of people, elite people, supporting you. Your average workers don't have that support. So cry your tears, wipe those tears away, lass, and get on with your life. Because this movie has been dumped and canned. Because although I want everyone to be happy in the world and actors see their hard work rewarded, that's not how the real world works. Ultimately, as a DC fan, I'm with Zaslav. Let's make the best films, the best TV. the best live action content. Let's have this new DC 10-year plan be the envy of the world. And finally, we can mock and laugh at MCU and Marvel fans like they've been mocking us since Marvel was created, when their comics started taking over DC. It's time for DC to rule. It's time for an awesome DC cinematic universe. And I don't care what side of the DCEU you support, the Hamadaverse, the Snyderverse. I love the Snyderverse. I love Nolan's movies. I have a soft spot for many DC movies. Superman the movie is the greatest fucking DC movie ever made, along with such great iconic others as well. But although I love the Snyderverse, it doesn't mean I'll cry if Zack Snyder just resets after he releases Blue Beetle. I want a great DC universe, and that, my friends, is where my loyalty lies. This has been Movies TV Mad. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. I'm so beautiful, I'm surprised you can look at me without getting excited. But anyway, until I see you on Saturday's show, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.